I met a guy, or I know a guy, that got a job with the Chicago Cubs as a trainer.
Oh, yeah?
Would you like to meet him?
Yeah.
Go through that?
Yeah.
He has been with the Royals. His name is Cleet. Don't know his last name. His wife works with my wife. Lives in Litchfield.
Done in a week.
Yeah.
Okay, I call this special workshop to order. City Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
Mayor Truitt.
Here.
Councilmember Longabaugh.
Here.
Councilmember Alston.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
Here.
And Councilmember Villanueva will be approximately 30 minutes late.
30 minutes late. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll go directly to item number 1.
And the first item will be a presentation regarding public transit in Surprise, presented by Kevin Wallace, MAG, and Brian Jungsworth from Valley Metro.
Hello, Council. We have 2 speakers to talk about public transportation today for you to get the current status of where both agencies are at and what's happening in the region, and in particular with respect to City of Surprise. There are 2 speakers tonight. The first is Brian Jungsworth, who is the Chief of Staff with Valley Metro, our PTA. His job as the Chief of Staff is to assist the Deputy and Executive Directors in the mission of the department, as well as lobbying for transit throughout various forums throughout the state and local region. The second speaker will be from MAG, Maricopa Association of Governments, Kevin Wallace. He's the Transit Program Manager, and he joined MAG in 2006 and is responsible for regional transportation planning and coordination. So with that, I will turn it over to Brian Jungsworth with Valley Metro.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Let me bring up this slideshow. Okay, here we go. I brought a number of our staff members here today, too, so we're trying to field all the questions we can from you, and we'll try to be as succinct as we can. We're aware of some of the council's different issues, but this is a basic agenda for today. Talk a little bit about paratransit, fixed route bus, and proposal for new services, what's going on in Vanpool, Northwest Valley Dollar Ride program, and then the Transit Life Cycle program program. The paratransit program, and I'll be really quick through these. As you know, there's about 9 different dial rides in Maricopa County, and our board accepted a regional paratransit study that basically looked at trying to condense those into, say, basically 3 different operations with 1 regional call center. And one of the things we'll talk a little bit about later in the agenda is we're going through a Northwest Valley Dollar Ride, inclusive of Surprise, El Mirage, Peoria, Sun City, where we would try to create a Northwest Valley operator for paratransit. And there's quite a bit of duplication in having so many different transit operators. We can eliminate some of the duplication and hopefully save some tax funds. So that's what the board wants us to move towards, and so we've been moving incrementally on this plan. The first step we did as far as this plan is to create what we call an in-person eligibility process. Right now it's a paper process, so we will actually pay for the trips for anyone that wants to become ADA certified under the Americans with Disabilities Act. We'll bring them into a central location and run them through an assessment process to give them certifications in the future to make sure that the people that are using the dial-a-ride services in ADA areas throughout the county are truly eligible for ADA. They have a disability that prevents them from riding the bus and so forth. And
Are you open to questions as you go?
Sure, yeah, that'd be best.
If this were to become regional,
Do you ever see the possibility of having somebody do the eligibility out here rather than, we're the farthest out,
Right.
rather than having those people with disabilities have to drive into Phoenix?
Yes, Mayor, Councilman Alton. One of the things that we've thought about doing is we want to start with a centralized site and then move towards the ability to see if it's feasible to actually go out into the different areas where you come out for a few days in different areas and then do certifications. You might be able to do the in-person assessment where they, if they didn't need to go through the full process, because it's quite involved. It's like, there's what we call an obstacle course, but it's more or less to see what their mobility is and so forth. So there's a lot of capital infrastructure that will be built at this new facility. And we're probably one of the few places throughout the U.S. that don't have these setups already. So that's what we're moving towards. But we're going to see if we can bring it out to...
We currently don't restrict our service, by the way, to people that are ADA eligible. It's eligible to all citizens. And one of the things we're going to be looking at as part of this process is to whether it should be restricted just to ADA and seniors 65 and up.
Brian, what about who is the county? What do you do when people are in county where they're not in one of the municipalities, and who's paying for them? How are they going to be taken care of?
Mayor, Councilman Jensen, we have a contract with the county now. As you know, they used to run what was called a special transportation services. So they've discontinued that, but they have funds to pay for county residents that are in county islands and so forth. So if we were to operate a dial ride in the Northwest Valley, there's a potential that we could use that dial ride to do it, and the county would foot the bill, or we would run a taxi service. Because you see some other things we're doing are travel training programs, taxi programs, mileage reimbursement programs to social service agencies and so forth. And those are typically quite a bit cheaper than running the dial ride services themselves. So the bottom line is the county would foot the bill. We're not going to look to any of the cities for
Good,
it.
so the county would be paying their share of that.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So just to recap some of the changes, we're trying to get all the applicants into this process and so forth at a single place. And then the contractor that we would hire basically would make the recommendations to our ADA office, and there's an appeals process and so forth. And we'd also give out a bus or a rail pass to cities that want to participate in that, where we have a certain amount of public transportation funds from Prop 400, and each city is given an allocation annually, and you could take some of the funds from that are available to each city and give residents that are ADA certified a free bus and rail pass that would provide, because a typical trip on Dollar Ride might be close to $40 a trip, and the subsidy levels on a bus or a rail are $250 or less. So in a couple trips you save all the money giving them this free pass if they can use the bus or the rail.
Ours on average is $28 a trip.
This is kind of the cost slide on how much this might cost. The costs decrease after 3 years, because we would bring everybody in the region in the first 3 years, and then they'd only be certified, say, every 5 years. Some folks would be given lifetime certification based on their level of disability. And I talked a little bit about the different costs and how this, the city has funds available at the RPTA to access, and then there's no cost to the users of this process. Let me introduce next Stuart Boggs, our planning manager, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the fixed route bus performance, how things are doing today, and then I know you're interested in some new services and so forth, and he can talk about those.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm Stuart Boggs, Manager of Transit Planning with RPTA. Okay, I'll do it.
Okay.
Current service or current transit serving Surprise includes Route 571, which is locally funded, as well as 572, which was a regionally funded route, provides 6 eastbound and 6 westbound trips. It's a bidirectional route. It's one of the first ones that RPTA began operation on. There's also the rural route, Route 660, which runs from Wickenburg down to Arrowhead Town Center in Glendale and includes stops in Surprise. The portion within Surprise for those people using that, and there's probably a few that do, to get to Arrowhead Town Center, the fare for that portion would be like $2. The fare for the entire route from one end to the other is $4. Total monthly boardings in Surprise, you'll see that it varies over time. There's a couple of things that affect this. There's seasonal variation, there's impacts of changes in fares, and most importantly, impacts from the current economic situation. People are traveling less because a lot of them are out of work at this point and are looking for other options. But on this slide, within the last 12 months, service or boardings peaked in August at about 3,418. And in our last reported month of October, we had over 2,800 boardings attributed to Surprise. Average weekday express boardings in Surprise, this is Route 571 and 572. 571 in the most recent month reported was 99 boardings, 572 with 30. The peak, like the peak for all service, was in August of this year with 134 boardings on 571 and 28 on 572.
571 has more than one bus to leave Surprise, correct?
Yes, it's not one bus. It's in fact there are 3 inbound and 3 outbound trips on 571.
Okay. And 572, you're working on the connection toward Arrowhead, because there was a lot of complaints on that.
We are looking at that connection. We're trying to balance the needs of different people. There's people who use that route in order to get over to the Mayo medical facility, and those trip needs are different from somebody using it to access an express trip downtown.
Right.
And we're trying to find a happy medium between those that works. But the other thing, as this slide shows, is the TLCP working group has been looking at possible revisions to the transit life cycle program. One of the possibilities would be 572 going away, and maybe even 660 going away. And if that does happen, what could some of that funding go towards? And one of the things it could potentially go towards would be a Bell Road extension from 99th to 99th Avenue. And we're showing at a 30-minute headways, the cost of that would be about $644,000 a year. 60-minute headways, about a little less than $350,000 a year.
When you talk about headway, it's the time.
That's the time. So it's the frequency of service is a headway. So if you have a 30-minute headway, somebody at any given bus stop has the assurance that a bus will get there within a 30-minute window. Proposed service options, intercity connector. The Surprise Transit study included 2 corridors, an east-west route that would operate on Bullard Avenue and Bell Road with service to Arrowhead Town Center in Glendale, and a north-south route would operate on Bell Road, Litchfield Road, Wattle, and Dysart Road. And the study provided 2 service options for each corridor. For the east-west route, there was an hourly service option and a 30-minute peak and 60-minute off-peak option. For the north-south route, an hourly option or a peak-only option. What we've done, and this slide here, which I think is probably not too readable up there, but it's probably more readable in your handouts, basically shows how that would break out the frequency, the hours of operation of that service. The proposed east-west route is shown here, going from the basically Bullard Avenue and the Civic Complex over to Arrowhead Town Center, and the north-south route. This is actually a change from the route as shown in the Surprise study, and reflects input that we've gotten from the City of Surprise regarding, especially up here at the northern end of the route. We've made some changes to the route to bring it into the Civic Center, but also to reduce a little bit the mileage on it. These routes have been costed out using Veolia Phoenix service costs, express cost per mile of $7.62, and assumes a 10% fare recovery. So for the east-west route, the estimated total annual cost to the city would be about a little less than $834,000. For the north-south route, it would be a little more than $670,000. So the total for both routes, if you operated both routes together, would be about a little over $1.5 million a year.
Is it my understanding that one of the routes ends up at Avondale?
Let me pop
South,
back.
north-south.
Back in this.
And the other one ends up Peoria?
One of these terminates at the Estrella Mountain Community College in Avondale, and that's the north-south route. And the east-west route terminates in Glendale at the Arrowhead Town Center.
What? Okay, go ahead.
And if these, I've just given a local service cost for this. This makes no assumptions as to who's paying it. These do go through multiple jurisdictions. And there are a couple of options here. The best option probably would be if all the affected communities participated financially in operating this route. If that didn't happen, the cost I gave is the cost that, if Surprise wanted to do this unilaterally, would be the cost to the city. So,
But none of those two routes take you into downtown Phoenix?
none of these routes taking to downtown Phoenix. They do provide a connection into our system. The Arrowhead Town Center route provides a connection to our express services at Arrowhead Town Center. The north-south route via the connection at Estrella Mountain Community College also ties into the Valley Metro system, and you could get
On an express route?
that would
you could take a bus
that would
forever.
be a local route at that point. There isn't an express route serving that
Okay.
location. And we also looked at an alternative service option of hourly service all day on the east-west route, and peak hour only service with uneven headways. And based on these, got a reduced service cost option for the east-west route of about $635,000 and change, and for the north-south route, almost $417,000 and change. So it's about $1 million, a little over $1 million annually cost for those two routes. And as I said, again, this doesn't make any assumptions as to who's paying what. It's just what the local cost would be if this was.
Stuart, are the connections surface streets, or does the Peoria take the 101 and Avondale take the 10?
Oh, Avondale is a local route.
Yes.
So if you make a connector there
You're connecting to a local route at that point. You're
Off the freeway.
off the freeway,
Yeah.
and
But the other one, the east-west route gives you a connection to a transit center that does have express service, that is freeway express service to downtown. In fact, there's two services at Arrowhead. One goes down 101, and the other one goes east on 101 and down I-17. So there's a couple of options for people to get downtown from that
So,
point.
Stuart, are you recommending then that the 571 would then go away, and then these two routes, north and south and east and west, would take its place, or what?
I think the intent of the Surprise Transit study was that this would supplement the 571 and meet a different trip need. One of the things that came out during the development of the transit study was a need of residents to get down to Estrella Mountain Community College. So that was like one need there. And then another need was people who wanted a connection over to Arrowhead. The connection to express service there is part of it. The other part of it is that it provides access to other options, like you can go from there to other places in the Bell Road corridor, or in Glendale. So there's a couple of different things going.
So you guys did a demand study?
The consultant did an analysis of the demand for both of those routes.
Stuart, the Estrella Mountain College, was that study done before Rio Salado started here?
Yeah, I would say it was done before that. That was when, this was
So
still
one
a
can
vacant
say,
field over here.
Yeah.
one can say then that probably in the near future, those students that are going to Estrella probably will end up going to Rio Salado. Or
Quite
university.
possibly. And based on that, there may be more of an interest in doing the east-west than the north-south route,
Yeah.
especially since that also provides connection into the express service.
Can you tell me of how many of those riders that are taking east-west are actually stopping at Arrowhead and shopping?
No, I can't. I can check the report to see if, but I don't know if they went into that level of detail to split out the trip.
It really is kind of important, if they're headed on for express or if they're going to shop in Arrowhead. I would like to know.
Travel models usually look at work-based trips and non-work-based trips, but they don't define what that non-work-based trip is. That could be a medical appointment. Right. That could be educationally related. That could be shopping. Okay. There's a number of things happening there.
Thank you.
The study also looked at a couple of circulator options within the city. These are internal connectors that would provide service within the city. Surprise, the blue route would provide access to the new city hall that we're sitting in right now, the senior center, the county building, the stadium, and shopping centers, including the Posada Auto Mall. The red route would provide access to several community centers, the auto mall, retail establishments, the civic center, and also the stadium. These routes that I'm going to show you on the next 2 pages are variations from the routes as shown in the surprise study, and I'll show you those maps later. These have been reduced to a certain extent in response to the input that we got from city staff about looking at ways to reduce the overall operating cost of these routes. Based on this and using a first transit service assumption, which is $5.54 per mile operating cost, the blue route would have an annual cost of about a little less than $340,000 a year. The red route would have an annual cost of, it's basically the same. The next 2 slides are the routes as originally defined within the surprise study. And you'll see in both cases they kind of have a little piece that drops down to access the auto mall and retail service on both sides of the 303 corridor. And for that option, you're talking about $415,000 and change annual cost for each one of those routes if you use the original routing.
So it costs us $250,000 more a year for a little
Yeah, it just depends where you want it to go and what you want it to do. Look,
now, you don't have stops on here unless each, where you're saying Surprise Stadium, City Hall, those are the stops?
Well, with the circulator route, you can run it a number of ways. You can run it to designated stops, or you can do it as a flag stop kind of thing where somebody on the side of the road basically puts up their hand and
dangerous,
and they pull to the curb and pick you up. So there's a couple of different ways you can run it. These routes would basically run in a single direction. They're not bi-directional routes, so they just would make a big loop around. And whether you wanted to limit it to designated stops or do a flag stop or some hybrid of the two would be up to the city, how they want to treat it. And
would this run all day, or?
This would run 14 hours. So
5 days a week.
Yeah.
Just a little concerned with the blue route. Kind of exclude a lot of the. If we were going to have that, you're taking away a lot of opportunity for half the city that lives south of Bell Road to use that
Yeah.
bus route.
No kidding.
I like the fact that you've changed it and you've moved out of Persada because you're really going through farmland right now other than an auto mall. So I like that change, but I'd like to see that shift over. If we were going to invest in something like this, I'd like to provide as much opportunity for everybody.
Right.
Pick up those kids that go to the library and.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, in communities where circulators have been really successful, that's one of the groups that have contributed to the success. One example is the Alex route in Ahwatukee in Phoenix, which links together YMCA's, libraries, schools. So you get a lot of trip generation from kids who are below driving age.
Right.
And it works good because one of the problems with schools is if you're doing after-school sports or you're doing after-school clubs, the bus doesn't wait for you. I mean, the school bus picks up at the end of the day and that's it. And if both parents are working, it becomes a real problem.
Another question, and that is, what is the headway for these?
This would be 60-minute headway.
So every hour,
Every hour.
the same bus would then come around and circulate?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, there it is.
And then we're into, I believe, I need to turn it over to Jim right now, who will talk to you about the Northwest Valley Dial Ride service.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Wright. I'm the Acting Deputy Director for Operations for Valley Metro. We want to bring you up to date on our Northwest Valley Dial Ride project. We've issued a request for proposal. It went out last week. We are looking for an operator to combine the current services operated in Scat, El Mirage, Surprise, and Peoria. It'll be, our goal is to unify these services under one contractor, trying to achieve some cost efficiencies. And
Will we?
well, that's why we're going to go out and on the market and find out. We believe we can. Yeah, we believe we can. Obviously, we'll take the proposals. They will be evaluated by staff members from each of the communities involved. And then before any decisions made, we would come back to each of the local jurisdictions and have your input. Maybe something you want to do, maybe something you don't want to do. So obviously, that's your decision.
How would, Randy, how would our dialysis program look at that?
They would provide the same level of service. As the RFP is currently constructed, they would provide the same level of service that we currently provide.
So us working with the medical community to have more utilization?
Would potentially increase the capacity. Now, there's some issues that need to be worked out when the responses come in. One of them, for example, is if they pick up somebody in El Mirage, typically on a GPS charging system, you're charged for the number of passenger miles that a person's within your city. Somebody coming from El Mirage, for example, and coming down Grand Avenue is largely in the city of Surprise. So we don't want to be charged for that person, but this is one of the details that we've got to work out through this RFP process, because one of the things I want to be careful with is that we currently control the amount of service we provide by where we go to.
Right.
So if they offer the opportunity to go more places, it could create an increase in our cost, because currently, with few exceptions, we don't go outside of the city of Surprise or outside of the area immediately bounded by Del Webb.
Right.
Is that,
Sorry.
doing it, if we were to go with the regional dial ride, can we make arrangements somehow if they do get extended service from what we provide now, that we have a way to catch that and either bill them or we don't get charged for it, or is there a way to do that?
I think, as Mr. Oliver pointed out, as we go through the process, obviously there's going to be some cost allocations that we'll have to work out, and we can develop a model that fits each of the communities and the entities involved in a consensus manner. I mean, there's many ways to look at billing the service. We can do it on a revenue hour basis in each community. We can do it based
Offsets.
we can do it based on revenue hours with an element of productivity in it. We can do it on a mileage basis. We can actually restrict trips to the community and enforce transfers within the combined service area. So if you want your folks just to be served within the city of Surprise, but yet someone wants to go to Peoria or El Mirage or somewhere else, then we would actually make them change vehicles before they enter the other communities. So there's ways that we can model it to, they'll raise your comfort level to make sure that costs are constrained as much as possible.
Thank you.
Real quick, as I mentioned, the RFP was issued just before the Thanksgiving holiday. It's been out just over a week. Our pre-proposal is set up for next Wednesday, I believe. So we were expecting maybe 3 or 4 proposals, hopefully. Following the proposal submittals on just before Christmas would be a nice present for us, something to look at over the holidays. We'll get our evaluation committee together, which again will be members of your staff, Peoria staff, some folks from.
So, Jim, these are private contractors that are in the business currently in this kind of business, dial-a-ride.
Yeah, that's correct. Right, we anticipate probably at least 3, conservatively. First Transit, Stuart talked about First Transit, some of the mileage rates he had in his other, they're a large national company that does this type of business. Veolia Transportation, you may have known them in a previous life as ATC or Phoenix Transit. They're, again, another big national company that would propose. And actually, there's a local firm we believe will propose on this, Total Transit. They're based in Glendale. So we expect some pretty good competition.
Good.
I would note that the way this is set up, that if a community goes with this, what you wind up doing is turning over all your assets to this new company. So once you do it, you can't get back in business very readily. So you need to make sure whatever decision you reach, that decision is the right one.
Randy, what is our total assets around with dial-a-ride?
I think we've got 7 vehicles. Is that, yeah, Dave's telling me that's right. We've got 7 vehicles essentially that we would bring in.
12-seaters?
Yeah, our last slide on this topic is the criteria that we use to evaluate the proposals we will receive. We'll review the proposed manager and the staff, how the system will be organized from the contractor standpoint. Obviously, pricing is a significant factor. Their experience, we mentioned 2 of the companies, they're national companies, have a lot of experience. Our focus is, one of our key focuses is the maintenance program, because the assets are publicly funded, publicly owned. We retain the titles to the vehicles, so their maintenance program is very important to us. We will make sure that our capital equipment is well maintained.
So the cost savings is going to come from maintenance? Where's the cost savings going to come from?
Well, typically the cost savings comes on the labor side.
Cheaper labor rates.
Drivers.
Yeah, the drivers are less expensive and they don't pay the same level of benefits. That's the principal save.
Oh, okay.
And it's for that reason that we need to pay particular attention to the maintenance program.
So, okay, so the way I understand it, Randy, back to your thing about, we turn over our vehicles over to Valley Metro?
Mm-hmm.
I see.
And then Valley Metro subcontracts with this firm.
And there'll be some things that, and I've met with most of the current dial-a-ride drivers, because obviously this is an issue of an area of concern or interest to them. And the way that we would envision the RFP is that the contractor would be required to give them first crack at any position, but it would be based on the contractor's scale and benefits, whatever the contractor's going wage rate is. So if there were 40 drivers that came into this system from the municipalities, assuming you went to a regional, and they had 36 positions, then they'd have 36. If they needed 42, they'd take all 40 of those, and then they would hire 2 more. But it would be predicated, obviously, on passing drug tests, predicated on, drivers having an appropriate driver's license, looking at what points they've got, if any. But there'll be some standards set up, and then there'll be something in the negotiated agreement that'll say they have to keep them a certain period of time, which typically is 6 months or so, to give them an opportunity to perform. So they'd essentially have the first crack at the position.
Okay. Next, we will speak to the van pools in Surprise. Actually, there are 19 van pools based in Surprise, carrying 175 passengers a day, roughly 30,000 miles a month. You can see the major destinations are typical of the larger employers across the valley. So 19 van pools out of the city of Surprise, doing very well. Nice, healthy program coming out of Surprise. Good. Good.
Now, Jim, can you explain the van pools? They buy a monthly pass?
Well, actually,
How does that work?
this is Brian's area of expertise, much more than mine, but he'll bail me out when I misspeak. Basically, the van pools work that some of them are fully subsidized by the employer, depending on the employers, and Brian, you may know which of these do it, if any, and some are partially subsidized by the employer, some are just subsidized by the passengers themselves, and the fee's based upon the monthly miles on the van. So there's that fee, and then the drivers, or the passengers who participate in the van pool also kick in for fuel.
Yeah, so it's based on the number of passengers and the type of vehicle, and then how far they go.
Because we have a variety of vehicles in the fleet. We have 8, 9, and 15 passenger vans, depending on, some of these employers are fairly significant in size, so just depending on their need.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim. Next up is Paul Hodgins. He's going to talk to you a little bit about our transit life cycle program we've been going through. And Paul, what's your title again? Capital Programs Manager?
Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Paul Hodgins. I am the Manager of Capital Programs for RPTA, and that includes the Transit Life Cycle Program. Let me just begin by explaining a little bit what the Transit Life Cycle Program is. Back in November 2004, when Proposition 400 passed, it allowed an extension of the half-cent Maricopa County transportation excise tax, and a third of that was dedicated for public transit. There's also a portion for the freeway program and then a portion for an arterial streets program. One of the requirements is that each of those three modes have a life cycle program. And what that does is it looks at the 20-year life of the tax, because the tax does sunset. It's a 20-year tax. We have to, it's basically a 20-year financial estimate forecast for all the revenues, not just the sales tax, but additional revenues that we have, which include fares, federal revenues to assist on our capital side, but then a reasonable estimate of all the expenditures for the programs to ensure that we can afford the projects that are in Prop 400, and to ensure that any decisions we make today don't negatively impact projects that we plan to implement later. So every year we do this process with updated revenue forecasts and expenditure forecasts to ensure that the program is balanced for the life of the tax, not just the next year. Now, one of the challenges we've been having is with the downturn in the economy and the decrease in the revenues, our sales tax forecast has gone down dramatically. Now, that's actually done by the Arizona Department of Transportation. They've historically done that for the freeway program. They've continued to do that under this new tax. They have a good, solid methodology that they use. So we take their forecast, and in this last year, their forecast for transit, for the transit side alone, has dropped over $1 billion for the life of the tax. So when we plugged in our new revenue forecasts for the sales tax, which that also limits our ability to match federal revenues, we had to decrease our federal revenues estimate, and we plugged in our new estimates for expenditures. We were basically looking at about a $1.3 billion shortfall through the rest of the program. It was a challenge. We've spent nearly a year working on this. We have a working group with the staff members from all our members working through all the issues. We've looked at all of the assumptions over and over again. We've looked at the revenues. We've had ADOT come in and talk about their forecasting methodology. We've gone through it, and we've come up with with a process to try to identify projects, how to cut projects, how to defer projects, how to minimize our costs to try to balance this program through 2026. So what I want to go through very briefly here is some of the criteria that the group is using in evaluating what projects to keep in the funded program and what projects to defer out. We have 4 main categories. One of them is equity, and we kind of define that as a jurisdictional equity. You know, we had a summary of where the tax revenue was supposed to be spent by jurisdiction across the county for transit. We want to maintain some semblance of that distribution. It doesn't have to be exact, but it's one of the things that we'll look at, so that every jurisdiction shares equally in the reductions, in the cuts. Another one is performance. We certainly want to look at ensuring that the services and projects, capital facilities we keep in the program perform well. For the services, capital projects, I want to make sure that the park and ride we build will actually get some usage. We want to ensure that federal mandates are satisfied. The ADA, for instance, if we're expanding bus service, that expands our ADA, or potentially expands our ADA service area, and so we want to make sure we accommodate those costs. So we want to make sure federal mandates are satisfied. And we also want to make sure that users are satisfied, that we're putting out the services that best meet the customer's needs. You know, as I mentioned, $1.3 billion is significant. So we want to make sure that we spend it in the best way possible. Budget's a big area. Obviously, by statute, we have to balance our life cycle program, but we also want to respect the city and town budgets. We don't want to simply shift the burden to the cities and say, okay, now you have to pay for it. We want to find ways to kind of find a balance there. And then the last is the voter or taxpayer satisfaction. We want to build as much of the Prop 400 as possible that we promised to the voters. And as I said, ensure that there's a good return on the investment, that the services that we do end up funding are used and are a good investment. Some of the things that this working group has accomplished, this is pulled from our last board meeting, so it's not all inclusive. It's just kind of some of the latest things. We did incorporate ADOT's latest forecast, which again went down. We had some remaining issues about assumptions that were in the model that we've been discussing and trying to reach agreement on. And we have a list of projects that we had all our member agencies go back and do some prioritization. And this is where some of the evaluation criteria come in. Each city looked at the projects in their own city, tried to define, you know, what's our highest priority project, what's our lowest priority, what do we think will perform best, what will perform worst. And we got together and then did some sub-regional meetings so that the West Valley cities, we got together with them, looked at each city's priorities, tried to ensure that they lined up, because especially in terms of the service, most of the routes are multi-jurisdictional. So if one city had it prioritized high and one had it low and they're neighbors, we want to try to, you know, we tried to reconcile that to ensure that there's some connectivity. We don't want to put a route out that's just 2 miles long in one city. You know, we want to make sure there's connectivity, that it gets into the rest of the system. And then we have some real-time tools. We have a financial model that we bring to every meeting, and so we can make some changes on the fly. You know, let's defer this route a year or two and see how it impacts the financial model, see how it impacts the bottom line, see how it impacts the distribution of the revenues. So we're working, continuing to work that through. We're at a point now where we have an alternative that we believe is fairly close to reaching consensus, to the group being okay. I don't want to say that the group will ever be happy with it when we have to cut so much, but we want to make sure that we come up with something that all of the cities can live with, that all the cities can support when we bring it back to our board of directors. Our deadline or our goal is to have something done by the end of this month, by December 31st, so we can bring it to the board in January. That's just a quick update on what we're doing with the working group. I'd be happy to answer questions on that.
There's been a lot of discussion as it relates to, in 2013, there was supposed to be bus service, at least some form of limited bus service provided on Grand Avenue that was going to be assumed, as I understand it, by RPTA. And I've heard due to financial consideration that that's going to be delayed. I've heard mixed dates as to how long that's going to be delayed. What is the current plan for providing that bus service on Grand?
The current, we're not quite done with the alternative. There may still be some negotiating and tweaking. But right now on Grand Avenue, we have 2013 in for Grand Avenue, but at a reduced service level. More than what's out there now, but not the full plan level.
Well, there's virtually none. The plan was originally it was going to be limited and essentially pick up some of the slack or pick up the what we're currently doing on our express routes. And I'd heard that some of the other communities had concern as to what the availability may be when they got to their city. Could you give us a little additional insight as it relates to how many trips are you talking about on Grand and, how they would operate?
It is intended to operate as a limited stop. It's still going to do that. And I don't recall exactly how many trips we have modeled right now. It's certainly more than what's out there now, but it's not the full amount. I will get the information to you. I just don't recall how many trips off the top of my head.
You can get that.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
I can have that for you tomorrow, absolutely.
But there's going to be some increase in routes by 2013?
Yes. We are able to keep it on schedule, but with a limited not the full implementation for that one. Yes.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
Thank you very much
for the presentation, for coming
Thank
out
you.
as a surprise.
Hanging in there. You feel okay now? I don't know how it'll be tomorrow. Okay, today.
It does. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for having me here today. Excuse me. I've got a little frog in my throat, so I'll try to not annoy you too much with coughing. My name's Kevin Wallace. I'm with the Maricopa Association of Governments. Put this map up here just quickly to show you that we represent all of the communities in Maricopa County. And I've pushed the wrong button already here. Okay, this one will work. At MAG, we are a voluntary association of local governments, so we take on a lot of the regional planning issues in Maricopa County. One of the areas that I'll be obviously talking about today is transportation and transit. Just wanted to mention briefly a couple of the more important documents that we're involved with. The Regional Transportation Plan is our 20-year look at transportation, the activities, projects, programs that will be scheduled over the next 20 years. MAG develops this, again, in cooperation with the cities and towns, ADOT and our transit operators. It does have a 20-year horizon, and this plan must be financially constrained, which means that you can only put projects into the RTP that you think you'll have money to actually be able to build. And then also, we're a non-attainment area for air quality, so there's a lot of air quality conformity work that has to go into the Regional Transportation Plan as well. Then down kind of one step from that is the Transportation Improvement Program. This is the 5-year capital program, similar to probably your capital improvement program at the city for the region. So this is the schedule of transportation projects that we anticipate building over a 5-year period. So this is an important piece of what we do at MAG as well. Then going, I want to talk, there's several studies that we've been working on at MAG over the last year and a half. So these all will relate in some way to the Regional Transportation Plan. So I'll just give you a kind of a brief overview of some of this work that we've been working on. First is what's called the Regional Transit Framework Study. This is taking a look beyond the Regional Transportation Plan at what transit needs we have in our region. We have a time frame of 2030 and 2050 that we're looking at, so we're looking quite a ways out. We've done this project in partnership with again, all of our member cities, but also Valley Metro RPTA, who is here today, and then Metro Rail as well. This document, once it gets to our regional council, probably early next year, could give us some guidance for future RTP updates and maybe future funding initiatives as well on transit needs. A couple of things. Why did we do this study, and how does it fit in with our programs? We know that the Regional Transportation Plan, even if it's fully funded, is not keeping pace with our transit needs. So there's demand out there that's not being met right now. And we also have learned as we've done this study that the current service that's out there across the region is not meeting the public's expectations in terms of convenience and time. One of the things that we did as we looked at this study was to look at deficiencies and needs. This was very much a technical study to understand the technical issues and give us a good framework for what issues are out there. Some of the things are up here. I won't go through all of these. I want to be able to get through all of these slides, but a couple of things I will mention. We know that there are existing areas that don't have adequate service today, even though they may have some service. It's not the frequency of service is not enough. Other things. We know that growing areas, particularly out on the fringe of the urban area, in many cases don't have any service. So that's certainly a deficiency. We know that even with Proposition 400, and if all of those services are put in place, we're still not going to be meeting the needs of the public. So went through a real technical look at what some of the deficiencies and needs are. Hopefully you'll be able to see kind of the differentiation of colors on this map that's up next. One of the things we also wanted to point out, this was not a look at local transit needs, but we do know that local transit, like circulator routes that you were talking about earlier, local bus routes are very important, fitting on top of a regional transit system. So we have identified areas throughout the region that have deficiencies on local service as well. And we've identified 3 different categories of that. Again, even in central Phoenix, where there's a lot of bus service, there's still some deficiencies we've identified. And then as you move out, those deficiencies increase in number. One thing I also would like to mention, public perception. We did a fair amount of work on this study, talking to the public. We telephone surveys, focus groups, public meetings. And one thing that I'll mention, the public has a very different perception of the transit system in this region compared to other regions that they've lived or visited. A couple of bullets up here, I think, illustrate that in the keywords that they've used and how they've described transit in our region compared to other regions. Using words like slow, old, and prehistoric were things that came directly from the public to talk about transit in our region. In comparison, when they talked about transit that they'd used in other peer regions that we looked at, used words like seamless and painless. So there's clearly a difference in, I think, how the public views transit in our region compared to other regions. The next step in this process was to start to understand why is that, what might account for some of these differences in perception. So one of the things we've done is we identified some peer regions to take a look at the types of transit service that they're providing, what kind of programs do they have in place. We actually did brought panel members in from each one of these regions back in November of last year with our Transportation Policy Committee. And they got an opportunity to talk with these peer regions to really understand what's going on in some of these peer regions. I think one of the most striking indicators is on this slide. We've taken a look at operating investments. This information is for the year 2006, and it shows total operating expenses by region, and then we've shown that per capita. You see the per capita average is just under $130 per capita for our peers. In our region, we're at about $71. So clearly there's a difference in the investment levels of us to our peer regions.
Just a question. Where would the Bay Area fit into that with their operating costs to run BART and so forth?
Mayor, Councilmember Alton, we didn't look at that one specifically. I would imagine they would, just off the top of my head, I think they would be above the peer region average because they do operate a lot of service. in the Bay Area, but we don't have that information specifically for them. So using some of this information as far as some of the public's desires, some of the investment levels that we observed in our peer regions, we've actually come up with 3 different scenarios to look at for the future on how we could invest in transit. And this is based on investment levels or the amount of money that we might invest in transit. So basic mobility is if you took the current investment levels and just extended that out to year 2030, what might that look like? Scenario 2 we called enhanced mobility. If you did a investment level that's more similar to our peer region average, what would that look like? And then third, transit choice. If you recall from the last slide, the Seattle region had the highest investment level. What if we invested at that level per capita? What would that look like in our region? And you can see in yellow, continuing on with current investment levels, there's a lot of deficiencies that we've identified that would not be addressed. If you go to more of a peer region average, you start to address many more of those, and if you go to the third option, most of the deficiencies could be addressed. I'm going to run through these slides fairly quickly, but this is going to show you the different transit services that would be involved at these different funding levels in these different scenarios. This is what's in the current regional transportation plan. What you'll notice in the heavier lines, the black and then the purple color, is basically the light rail system, 57-mile light rail system that's being planned, and then some of the background bus service on top of that. If you go to scenario 1, you can see that you can start to add some what we would call arterial bus rapid transit service on some of the key arterials, but there's not a lot of new service that would be included in a scenario like this. Scenario 2, I think, is where you start to see some real significant improvements or increases in service levels. In particular, I would note the light green color that's following, for instance, the Grand Avenue corridor. We've called this a high-capacity peak period service that could be something like a commuter rail type service. You start to have the funding available really to start reaching out further into the across the region and provide that mobility I think that people are looking for. And then in scenario 3, you can see that there's really much more of a full regional system that's being provided in this scenario. And again, the Grand Avenue corridor, you see that it's extending now beyond the 303 out to the Whitman area. So you have more geographic coverage in this scenario. A couple of other things I'll mention, regional intermodal facilities, where you'd be able to start connecting up different transit service options. We've identified key locations for that as well. And again, in Surprise at the Grand Avenue 303 area is a key area that we would see for intermodal connections for a regional transit system in the future. And then we also took a look, as I said, beyond 2030, primarily looking at, if you're familiar with the Hassayampa transportation framework that our agency has recently completed out in the West Valley, recognizing that beyond 2030 in the far West Valley, transit services will need to be provided as well. So what does all this cost? This is always the fun, interesting part. A lot of numbers on here. I'll just mention the RTP base. This was assuming before some of these reductions have been made. Local contributions and regional, about a $14 billion investment in transit by year 2028. These 3 scenarios would be funding in addition to that. So scenario 1 would add about $2 billion in additional revenue. Again, that's why you don't see a lot of new service on that scenario. Scenario 2 would provide an additional approximately $11 billion in revenue, and then scenario 3 would be $21.5 billion additional in transit investments. So you can see that would be a significant investment for this region to get up to, say, a Seattle level of investment in transit. Next area that I'll talk about is some of the commuter rail planning that we're doing at MAG as well. We had completed back in April of 2008 a commuter rail strategic plan. really to gauge what the interest level was in this region for maybe providing commuter rail in the future. A lot of out of that study, we learned that there's a lot of interest. I think things like $4 gas a year or a little over ago, in particular, has really increased people's interest in looking at commuter rail as an option. So right now we have 3 studies ongoing looking at what we're calling a corridor development plan for Grand Avenue, looking in very much detail at the feasibility of commuter rail in that corridor. Also looking at commuter rail on what we call the Yuma West corridor out in the Southwest Valley, and then a commuter rail system study looking at the entire region. This graphic just gives you an idea of all the studies and some of the things we're looking at as we put them together. I would mention on the right side there is work being done also by the Arizona Department of Transportation as they look at a statewide rail framework study. They're looking at intercity corridors, in particular Phoenix and Tucson, and how rail could work on a statewide level. So we are coordinating with ADOT at that level as well. For the system study, this shows you the 5 corridors that we're taking a look at. The idea with this is to figure out what the feasibility is, again, of implementing commuter rail. What would some of the ridership potential be? What would the costs be? And if you were to implement a system, what would be a logical way to sequence developing the system? So this is the base system that we're starting with as we evaluate commuter rail potential in our region. Just mention real quickly, we are doing travel forecasting, so we're starting to get an idea of what the ridership on some of these corridors would be. The red line at 1.5, this is showing boardings per mile, per revenue mile for the different systems. 1.5 is kind of a national average that we look at, so for commuter rail systems, that's kind of the benchmark that we've been looking at. One thing to note, the southeast corridor, that line, back just for a second here, that goes down to Queen Creek in the Southeast Valley, in terms of ridership at least, has the highest ridership potential we've noticed in our region. I think a couple of reasons I'd mention for that. Obviously, that area is primarily built out at this point, so the development is there to support it. And there's also in the East Valley, I think, a fairly robust local transit system that's feeding into that commuter rail system and increasing the effectiveness of commuter rail in that corridor. Skip anything here? So just a couple of things, and I'll close my presentation as we, again, some of the work that we're doing at MAG right now is looking out into the long term and looking at long-term transit needs. A couple of things that the city could consider as we're working on these regional initiatives and also at a local level. Again, identify some of the local transit services that you may be wanting to provide in the future that would support and integrate with a regional system. Again, we've identified some of those areas on the map that I showed you for where we do see a need for more local transit. And then also coordinating with other cities on the Grand Avenue corridor in looking at developing transit-supportive land use policies and different things to support commuter rail on this corridor long-term. At the national level, there's a lot of talk now about things like livable communities and sustainability. I think that's one way that you can start to plan for this high-capacity corridor along Grand Avenue and really start to improve the potential for the corridor. So with that, Mayor and Council, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council, questions?
Glendale on board with this Grand Avenue corridor?
Mayor, Council, yeah, we've had for these studies many meetings, and we have what we call a project review team meetings for the Grand Avenue studies. They've been participating in that, so they're right with us on the study work.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Kev.
Two for me, please.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Review of proposed written strategic marketing plan for City of Surprise as prepared by Moses Anchel Agency of Phoenix, and that will be Ken Lynch, Communications Director.
afternoon, Council. I'll need just a second to get the presentation up.
See, where's our network?
How's the hip skip?
Better.
See.
Better, huh?
Where's my IT
Soreness
friends?
going away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pain level's getting better. Yeah.
Like I'm on my own. Ah, here we are.
A reporter? She, huh? Is that a reporter? Yeah. No. Yeah, so we were talking to her mole. Somebody's a mole.
Ready?
Yeah, we have a couple apps.
Okay. You want to wait a few minutes? Beg your pardon, Mayor?
If you would, let's go ahead and...
Okay, sure. Well, good evening, Mayor, council members, City Manager Oliver. Tonight, we're going to present with you with the completed part of Phase 1 of the Strategic Marketing Plan. You have in your packets the written report from the consultant Moses Anschel. What you'll see this evening is a staff revision of that report. In other words, these are recommendations that incorporate not only the report, but the review of the staff by the report, or of the report.
Ken, can I ask you a question?
Sure, go ahead, Councilman.
Because you're a marketing guy. You got a lot of savvy. How would you rate the Moses Anschel report on a scale of 1 to 5? 5 being great, 1 being poor.
I would say that they completed Phase 1 with under the direction that we gave them. They satisfied the requirements of the scope of work.
That's your opinion.
I think it's more of a factual statement.
Okay. I thought it was terrible. I mean, all they did was instruct us on branding.
Right.
I don't need a marketing class.
I understand.
I need specific surprise.
Right.
Okay? I was totally disappointed.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I think
Now, hopefully you and Mark and some people in the
Right.
city can elevate this thing to where it can function.
I think as we go through our presentation tonight, I think you'll see some of those revisions that I mentioned earlier. And part of the process, too, tonight is to hear from you and get additional feedback. But I hear what you're saying, and I think that we're moving in a direction that's going to be a little more action-oriented with a results focus.
Well, we'll see.
So quickly what we'll do is review the process. We'll also do a presentation of that strategic approach and also seek council feedback, as we've done in the past for sessions like that. A little bit of background. The premise for the study was that a strategic branding approach is needed to truly position the city. Our marketing approach in the past has been event-specific, and it's been kind of narrow because of that, and ad hoc. Our approach had been when we need to market the city or when we need to market a product or an event that we do. CRS, for example, in addition to everything else they do with services and programs, also promotes and markets CRS-sponsored and organized events. Economic development, same situation. With all else they do, they have very specific goals in terms of their outreach and advertising and marketing, and they've been, with our assistance, responsible for business attraction marketing. The Communications Department, as you probably know, does all department-to-public information, makes sure it's accessible and usable so people can find information about the city, including their elected representatives. We also do the public engagement piece, things like public comment on the general plan and on the recent bond election, et cetera. There have been several of those. Promotion and publicity of the city's accomplishments and activities. Community relations, our work with organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, with the Tourism Committee, with Interfaith, with the myriad other work groups that we work with. Media relations, which is pretty self-explanatory. All of our employee and internal communications is also handled by this department. Our council support, everything from the council conversations show to web pages to assistance with writing and that sort of thing. And most recently, charged with helping develop and implement a marketing plan. We do help CRS, however, of course, with their advertising design, the website design and management for the CRS department, spring training, CTCA, other tennis events. We do their commercial television production, and we broadcast featuring their events. For example, tomorrow night we'll be live from the tree lighting ceremony on Channel 11. Anybody who can't go or would like to see it on TV can watch it live, just part of that community building that we take so seriously in communications. We also do the news release and photo distribution for CRS events, and we use the Progress and other city vehicles to help with their promotion and marketing. This is a pretty typical example, the cover of Progress magazine featuring tennis superstars coming to Surprise. Same with economic development, advertising design, and copywriting for them. You see an example of an ad that we've done for them, the Techcelerator logo and the website for the Techcelerator, graphic and logo design for economic development. We also help them with their local and regional promotion, news release, copywriting, distribution, and we set up media interviews and sometimes speak on their behalf when we have enough information to do so. And, of course, with Surprise 11 and Progress Magazine, we promote and market the economic development efforts. So, to get back to some of what the consultant identified, this, again, is in this form of a review. They interviewed you, among many other community members, and discovered a variety of what they call community equities. One of them is a sense of optimism and friendliness that Surprise has. That hometown, small-town feel was actually a very genuine and authentic piece of the Surprise puzzle. A family orientation in Surprise. Recreation as really a Surprise signature. And a concept of volunteerism and compassion not as uniformly evident as they put it in other communities, primarily due, I think, to the fact that the Sundancers is as active as that group is. It's an unbelievable group, one of the largest, if not the largest, volunteer organization in the West Valley, and their impact on the community is quite evident. And they mentioned the newness and the cleanliness of the city is also something that people recognize as equities. So, that's some of the foundations that we have to build on. Background, the council got initial feedback, or gave initial feedback to the consultant report in June. In August, the council approved the connectivity opportunity theme supported by the 4 platforms. We'll review that in just a minute. And phase 1, again, is the plan approach that incorporates the theme and the platforms. Phase 2 is the actual production and execution of the elements of a marketing plan. And we'll talk about those tonight, too. Just to review, this is what council saw and gave direction to move forward on back in August. The overarching theme of connectivity and opportunity, supported by 4 primary platforms. FQOL stands for families and quality of life. Beneath that is a listing of equities that people mentioned in the course of research that help support that platform. Education is something council felt strongly about, that this is a community in which education is an emerging platform, something that's not only important now but going to be more important in the future. Recreation again and again came out as the very top equity in Surprise. Not really a surprise considering how magnificently CRS executes its programs and the resources over the last 8 to 10 years that have been devoted to recreational activities in the city. And business and entrepreneurial. The trace elements were identified here. It does dovetail with an opportunity theme. Our home-based businesses, of course, are very strong here. And innovative things like the Techcelerator also support that as being a legitimate platform. And throughout, of course, is volunteerism and compassion. Those elements can be applied to any of those platforms. There's always an opportunity for volunteering or compassionate work in any of those fields. Our audiences, again, in terms of review, were our existing residents, our prospective residents, our existing and prospective businesses. And another significant one that wasn't mentioned back in August is the internal group, our employees, who will be the ambassadors of our brand and who need to understand it and be able to represent it in the community. And our prospective temporary visitors, what does that mean? That means people who might come out for spring training, people in our spring training markets or other cities that are considering, say, a vacation in Arizona. Characteristics of a sound brand, they are to establish these authentic expectations, keyword being authentic. If we do establish expectations for the city, they must be met when people do experience surprise. So consequently, they should be research-based, which these are. They should reflect the true surprise, and they should present answers to questions like, what will I, my family, my business, and my career encounter in surprise? So establishing authentic expectations is a firm characteristic. Inspiring loyalty is also important. One way to measure that is, do businesses decide to stay here, or do they decide to relocate here? Do residents stay, or decide to come here. Inspiring loyalty. And finally, consistency. Our brand should be made public and shared regularly, and that familiarity will breed eventually an affinity for the brand and turn into a source of pride, per the consultant's recommendations. Positioning statement, how to sum up what the brand is designed to express. What can we produce as a touchstone or a source statement that over the years, that's a key phrase too, that this is a long-term commitment. Over the years, will speak clearly to everyone who has some responsibility for handling or managing the brand. A positioning statement we'd like to present to Council for your feedback and input from you is this one. Surprise and its residents continually create a place of connection and opportunity because of our shared commitment to 5 pillars of community life: our families and our quality of life, our education, recreation, entrepreneurialism, and volunteerism. The desired response. What do we want audiences to feel, or how do we want them to react as they encounter the Surprise brand? Well, they should know that their city is a place of opportunity where optimism and newness creates an atmosphere of openness, where connecting to family, new friends, recreation, education, career, business development, and community is easy to do. They should feel assured, and this is also important, that Surprise is the correct choice for them, for the lifestyle where connectivity and opportunity are a focus of the government and a focus within the community. And they should grasp that Surprise is a place where recreation for all ages is a prized asset and where one's compassions and volunteer side can find expression. So how do we know if we're doing that or not? One of the recommendations in the report is for a regular phone and online surveys. That's an interesting recommendation because it does match the trend toward additional engagement that our department and our organization as a whole has been moving towards in recent months. There are current surveys on the web, for example, and in the January Progress magazine. In fact, we'll quickly jump out to the web. We do have this survey button down here, and this again is for community engagement and reaction. When we get into this one today, okay. This one is current. We just launched it today. There are 4 others that reside on the web that people can check that are closed now, but they can check and see what kind of reaction or response there were. This one is about web satisfaction, answering questions about the website and whether or not it's useful. Which we assume it is, but people who are always interested in feedback. And when you submit your survey, this just went up today. I think there's only 8 or 10 responses on it. But one thing I like about this particular survey tool is it does give you the opportunity to immediately see what the results have been. You don't just fill out yours and send it in. You get instant feedback of how people are reacting to the survey. So that's an example of how, again, we're continually promoting engagement and involvement and feedback from our residents. And that fits in very nicely with that recommendation of phone and online surveys. The next thing I'd like to point out is that this data is relevant. SurpriseAZ.com does have millions of annual page views. It is usually the initial contact for anyone outside of the market as they consider and think about Surprise. And it's well optimized in Internet search engines, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. Progress Magazine, where other surveys reside, paper surveys that you tear out and return by mail. That scored very high in a survey as a resident information source. We get a good response in mail-in surveys that are included in the Progress magazine. And, of course, it's the largest periodical publication in Surprise. It goes to every Surprise household 4 times a year.
And we were doing that anyway, right?
Beg your pardon?
We were doing that.
We started doing surveys just last summer. Progress magazine's been in existence for quite some time.
Yeah.
We started doing surveys last summer, and the response was good, right around a little higher than 1%.
And we're going to be doing a statistically based survey that's going to take into account, for example, some people are more Internet savvy. As income tends to go up, they tend to use the Internet more. So sometimes Internet surveys can have some bias based into them.
Absolutely.
So as a result of that, and I think Ken's going to discuss that a little bit next, we're going to do a statistically based survey that will statistically survey based on numbers by district. So, for example, people in Councilmember Villanueva's district may not respond on the Internet, or may not respond, say, by mail, but under this survey technique, enough calls would be made until we got a representative sample that would be statistically meaningful.
Right. That was our idea, right, Ken? That was yours?
Yes, sir. Mhm.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
we're
Ken's
going
idea.
to go through that. Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
We'll move forward to talk a little bit about that National Citizen Survey because it's coming up. What you have in front of you is a typical sample of the National Citizen Survey, and that's coming up. What's great about this, what we're excited about, is that it's a customizable turnkey survey. It's the first ever scientific community-wide survey that we'll have done in Surprise. The technique is to survey 1,200 residents. It is a random selection. The plus or minus is 5% on the survey. The questions are Likert scale, as you can see there, plus some open-ended questions. Likert scale is the 1 through 5, strongly agree, strongly disagree, neutral, those kinds of questions. Their weighted results will reflect our population and geography. We think that's important because population and geography, geography has a lot to do with population and Surprise. We have, for example, heavy concentrations of retirees in certain parts of the city, et cetera. That'll help the results will be weighted to reflect that uniqueness here. It's a three-phase mail survey. It begins next month. Three-phase meaning the first phase is they will contact the 1,200 selected people and say, hey, this is coming. We'd appreciate your engagement and involvement. The second step is to mail the actual instrument, which you have in front of you there, or at least a sample of one. And then the third step is to mail the survey instrument again. Say, if you didn't participate the first time, please take a few minutes and complete this.
Well, excuse me. A return letter or anything, will we be giving that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We get a highly detailed statistical analysis of these results, and the firm would either come here to present them, which we don't encourage because it's expensive, or they will present the report to us for presentation to the council.
And the intent is to identify perhaps the needs in Councilmember Villanueva's district are different perhaps than Councilmember Alton's district. It will identify, what the similarities are and what the differences
Exactly.
are.
Good.
Another thing we like about this is that, as you know, we're an ICMA performance measurement city now. For a lot of the ICMA performance measures, there is a public feedback, a public survey element. This does meet that protocol. National Citizen Survey works hand in hand with the ICMA so that we will get that statistical information too.
I like that.
Some of the jurisdictions that are using the National Citizen Survey now, here locally, Chandler, Scottsdale, Sedona, Tucson, Yuma all use it. There's actually a total of 14 Arizona cities. I pulled those 5 out more or less at random. Some of the things it measures that are applicable to marketing, it does measure how people feel about their community, their sense of community. It does measure recreational opportunities, programs, and classes, the sense of civic engagement in the community, volunteerism, civic attentiveness, voting behavior. Citizen involvement is also something that they ask about. Overall direction of the community, they ask about that as well. Those are applicable to the platforms that we see in our strategic marketing plan. Another thing I'd like to spend a minute on that I think Council might find interesting is this concept of key driver analysis. I know Councilman Hall is aware of this as somebody who has been in marketing himself. This is a way in which service components have the greatest influence on a customer's overall satisfaction are identified. For example, no disrespect to our friends in police and fire, but everyone will say that they are very supportive and really like the police and fire service in a community. That's almost a given in these kinds of surveys. But through a variety of questioning techniques and statistical analysis, they can drill a little deeper and identify what components have the greatest influence on customers' overall satisfaction. And by determining what drives those opinion results, organizations can focus any survey-based change more effectively, increasing the likelihood of improvement over time. Key driver analysis is called. For example, we do have the results from the city of Chandler. One of the things they discovered, their key driver analysis showed that if they worked hard to preserve natural areas, maintain good health services in the city, and kept people well informed, people generally felt good about Chandler and Chandler city government. So those are the they're not really hidden, but they just need to be revealed by some good statistical measurement techniques, and that's what the key driver analysis does. We'll get that with the National Citizen Survey. So overall, what's our key message in marketing? We propose to you for your consideration and feedback that the message is that this is a city where people are connected and opportunities come to life, and that it's in our DNA, it's authentic, it represents the real Surprise. Some of the components of getting that message out, these again reflect the platform, so they're not really shouldn't be a surprise. Build Surprise as that growing city that retains a small-town quality of life. Galvanize that association with Surprise and the concept of lifelong learning here. Fortify the recognition that we're a community that has recreation opportunities for everyone, all ages and all capabilities. And demonstrate a reputation as a business-friendly, entrepreneurial environment. We've got some seeds growing in that respect with efforts like the Tech Accelerator. And strengthen the perception that Surprise cares and that its residents are engaged. Again, that is an authentic piece of Surprise that's already in existence that can be grown very nicely into a strategic marketing plan. Councilman Hall, I think this goes a little bit more in the direction you were asking about. How do we do that? If that's what we want to do, how do we do it? The phase 2 idea is to get to the development then of a look feel of the brand. What's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? We would incorporate the platform and the themes into that. Another commitment that we'd need to make is to make sure that it's clearly present in every communication touch point. That means everything from the website to the magazine to our news releases, brochures, letterhead, anything we produce should reflect that Surprise brand. And we have a prototypical example of that just a little bit later in the presentation. Another key thing is partner buy-in. Anybody, any organization that we're associated with that might be involved in promoting Surprise should buy into this concept and should reflect the brand in their materials as well. That includes organizations like the Surprise Regional Chamber and the Tourism Committee. And there are others as we grow and mature. Our branding approach, though, does have a challenge. It's a phenomenon and a particular challenge, and that is we have that single theme of opportunity and connection, but we have a lot of platforms. A little different, a little unique, and does present some marketing challenges. I'd like to talk a little bit about some successful approaches, ones that we're familiar with. GEICO does a great job. They have one theme. The theme is you will save money by getting car insurance from GEICO, but they have many approaches. Nissan might be a little less familiar. They have many platforms and one theme. GEICO, as we know, the theme is save money on car insurance by switching to GEICO. They use the lizard. They use the caveman. They use the little pile of money with the eyes. It all ties back to that same theme, save money on car insurance by switching to GEICO. Nissan has a different approach. They have a theme. Their theme is shift. You see it on all of their collateral, all of their marketing. But we'll jump back out to the internet. You might recognize this once you've seen it. They take that word shift and they continually change what it is you're shifting. Shift youth, shift technique, etc. That is a little more in line, we think, with supporting multiple platforms and a single theme. Because that's what we have. We have that layered approach. We have connectivity and opportunity as a theme. And we have family, quality of life, business, recreation, community education, and compassionate Surprise as part of our platforms. So our approach would be to blend those, to layer those, to target those depending on what audience we're trying to reach. Here's that prototypical example I told you about. This is an advertisement that is appearing currently in Arizona Avenues magazine. We jumped a little ahead because we felt we were on the right track after we got council direction in August. So this is produced by the communications department staff, the design, photography, copywriting. As you can see from the image, it does have an image of a family. It does have a recreation image. Those are two of our pillars, two of our platforms. But it also has the theme, the puzzle pieces up there. That concept of connecting is there. And then when you jump to the copy, why do family love Surprise? You know, let me jump back for a second to orient you. This is in the upper right there where the copy is, why do families love Surprise? It mentions families quite explicitly and then says, because Surprise is where all the pieces of family life come together. You're connected to home, career, community, school, kids, your personal interests, and more. Connecting them all is what makes Surprise the most promising new city in Arizona. Now we can take that theme and actually adjust it using the same material. This is the same picture, obviously, but now it addresses the theme more directly. Surprise, bring life together. We put that up there right in the middle of all those puzzle pieces. Change the copy a little bit. Your life has many pieces. You're connected to home, career, community, nature, your personal interests. Connect the pieces. Bring your life together. In Surprise, Arizona's most promising new city. These are some of the approaches, Councilman, I think, that, just speaking directly to Councilman Hall to answer your question, where we can take these concepts and actually turn them into marketing collateral and marketing strategic approaches that address the council direction we received in August.
Yeah, I just don't know that I'm just being honest with you.
Oh, I appreciate it.
I mean, seriously, I just don't know that we learned anything.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing aha about what Moses Van Schell said.
I appreciate that.
We all know we have a lot of volunteers in the city.
Mm-hmm.
We all know we've got entrepreneurs in this city. I mean, that's a fact. Chamber tells us that.
Right.
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
Oh, here. I mean, there was nothing that we really learned that these guys did this study for. And, I mean, I was looking for some insightful things we didn't know. Okay, and how to take surprise to another level in marketing. And what they did was just tell us what we already know.
Go ahead, Councilman. Sorry.
Well, I think at that time, if we look back, we knew what we were, but we wanted to know what we should do. Tourism was really, really coming strong at that point in time, if everybody recalls. And should we go after tourism and certain things like that? So we wanted to get a clearer direction. I think we all had a feeling of what our strengths were, but I think it's how we wanted to go about it and what we wanted to do. Themes like this can tie into some tourism if we wanted to. I sort of like it.
No, I like what Ken's department did to communicate. I like that, but he did that. We did that internally.
Right.
And what I'm saying is we hired this company because they were supposed to have this marketing expertise to tell us something we didn't know about our city. That would give us insight. You know what I'm saying, Ken?
I appreciate the comment. Absolutely. I know what
That's
you're
a
saying.
good point.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom.
Right, and I think, excuse
Yeah.
me for interrupting.
Go ahead,
but I
sir.
think we're also looking for a strategy to implement that.
Yes.
And I thought we made that really, I support you, because I thought we made that very, very clear when Moses Anshel came in, that we weren't looking for a slogan.
Right.
We were looking for a strategy. And,
Exactly.
So the frustration maybe is shared that we didn't get it when we paid somebody else to do it, but we're getting it, it seems, from you.
Yes.
Well, one of the things I would look, reflecting back to that August meeting that I thought that they pointed out is that from a tourism perspective, that Surprise doesn't have the tourism draws to be able to support a tourism strategy at this particular
Not
point.
at this point.
Okay. In other words, we don't have that wow event, we have some things that last a day or two or three, or we have spring training.
Right.
But we don't have anything that, and so therefore, based on what they said, that we could not support a marketing strategy at this time that had a heavy tourism component because we don't offer that at this point.
But going forward, I think we will. There's a number of activities that take place here, and a lot more activities that we have the potential of putting on.
Right.
Either be it concerts or craft shows or whatever. Okay, and as our city builds out, I think that we will have the capability of showcasing our city in a particular way that is unusual for everybody else. I think that we will come up with that one of these days. And I think that, through Mark and the council and the city manager and the mayor, I think that we can all put our heads together and come up with something that will, to make us stand out, to help us stand out, and then play on that. And tourism can adapt that, and, all the other partners with the city. So, right now, we're at a lull because of economic situation. Going forward, I think that you're right, spot on, Ken. Pitching us with those five key elements,
Right.
and then each time we introduce something new in our venue, then we pick up on that same items.
Yeah.
Okay, you may.
And my feeling about the positioning statement is it's too cumbersome. It's too wordy. it just kind of, you know? And I think it needs to be...
A little sharper?
Yeah, that's my opinion now, Ken. I'm just giving you some feedback. I just think it's too wordy. And really, a positioning statement, you got to be careful with a positioning statement in that you got to be able to fulfill it.
Right,
I mean,
that
you don't want to
authenticity part.
overpromise, you know.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's, so I'm a little concerned about this positioning statement. Did they write this?
That's a revision of a draft from Moses Anschel. And of course, we're here to get exactly the kind of feedback you're
So
giving
you
us.
tweaked the original
Correct.
a little bit?
Right.
Okay.
And we can tweak it again.
Yeah. Well, I'd recommend that, but
Great.
that's me. You know?
Thank you.
I don't want to give up too quickly that we don't have the assets to create a tourism base, because I, in fact, don't agree with that. I think that there are plenty of assets that simply have not been utilized or underutilized.
Yeah, you're right.
So you're talking about Western Heritage Trail, you're talking about the back roads to the Grand Canyon, you're talking about Speed World, which has, you say Speed World, it's just not cars or trucks.
That's a real phenomenon.
It's remote control airplanes,
absolutely.
BMX. There's a lot of excitement going out there, and on given weekends, they'll have 10,000 spectators at a truck race. We need to capitalize on that, especially when they say, we're coming to you from Surprise, Arizona.
Right.
Great point.
Yeah.
It's a great point.
In the white tanks.
The white tanks, we
Right
need
in
to
our
take
backyard.
ownership of that. Nobody has. We should. And promote that, and we do put it in a lot of the collateral pieces that you put together. But I think we can be even more intentional about that.
And that does show up in our recreation platform. But you're absolutely right, Mayor, Councilman. I mean, there's no question that a phenomenon like Speed World, which I think kind of surprised everybody in the last year or two, is definitely an asset to us as not only tourism but also a regional visitation also.
Yes.
You know, that's a great way to drive things. And the Tourism Committee is scheduled, I think, to present to Council next month a strategic plan. And we're working very closely with them to keep them apprised of how marketing is coming along so that these two will dovetail and work together. In fact, that's the next point on the presentation is that dovetailing is going to be important, is that unifying the brand across the city with the partners, shared a commitment for how to use it, that organization-wide awareness and commitment is going to really play into this.
Additionally, this is just a thought, my opinion, but I think we ought to capitalize on other West Valley opportunities. PIR. Come to the West Valley and go to a race at Phoenix International Raceway and enjoy tennis over in Surprise.
Sure.
And just start connecting them together.
Well, that Wildlife World Zoo is a fantastic. That's even closer than PIR, and that's a family event. There's restaurant there. It's a great asset.
Because, you know, you think about people go to Los Angeles and say, I'm going to L.A. A lot of times they're not even in L.A.
They never make it to the city of. That's true.
You know what I'm saying? I'm going to L.A. But, you know, it's the beach. It's
Sure.
Malibu,
They wind up in Huntington Beach, right?
Disneyland.
Right.
It's,
Santa
you know,
Monica.
and they're not even in L.A. So,
Yeah,
you know,
very good point.
that's a good point, Mayor. I mean,
Yeah.
the West Valley, people don't care about, you know, if it's, okay, here's Glendale and here's Peoria, if they're visiting the West Valley. Right?
Right, exactly.
And there's professional football, professional hockey, all kinds of, I mean, there is a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot happening in the West Valley.
But I like the approach. I really do. I like that. I think that's adaptive and we can use it, and I like it a lot. I do.
Well, it was something that, you know, council directed us to do. So this is, clearly this was the council direction. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I agree with Skip's saying that it was kind of complex, that message, but truly it reflects, and this is where I'm agreeing with Joe, it reflects all the opportunities that are available in Surprise. We're not one-dimensional. We have so many potential dimensions that are very, very positive for our community that we need to somehow create this fabric that interweaves those and shows the picture of who Surprise, what Surprise really is.
Beautiful, and that's more than one picture. And that's one of the reasons I wanted you to see that shift idea, is we can use a theme and still tie in all these different images, all these different pictures in a fabric-type motif to create this image. And all that will start to work together as a brand as time goes on. Are we ready to proceed? Our target audiences, now we're going to talk a little bit about placing the brand before the audiences. Our target audiences are composed of two, roughly speaking, two demographic groups, young adults and young families and active adults. a little bit about the characteristics of each. Young families tend to commute. They don't read the newspaper very much. They don't watch a whole lot of TV. No time. Fairly heavy radio listeners because they're in the car, and they're very heavy online. Active adults tend to commute more moderately. A lot of them are retired or working part-time. They are heavier newspaper readers. They developed a newspaper habit when they were younger. Fairly heavy TV watchers, moderate radio listeners and billboard because, again, they're only moderately in the car, and they're moderate to heavy online. I think all of that is what we know. In both groups, TV and radio listenership is fragmented. What young families are watching is usually not what active adults are watching, et cetera. Placing the brand before our audiences, SurpriseAZ.com is clearly the vehicle that has the most potential to continue to do this, as it has over the last couple of years. It gets millions of page views a year. It's a clean, well-organized, and inclusive site. It is our primary face, not only to our residents, but also to the outside world. It's a significant showcase for the Surprise brand, and the one that's most adaptable also. And it can measure site visitors and feedback, and that's, of course, really key.
Are you thinking about a way to convey entrepreneurialism and volunteerism in a graphic?
It's exactly the next thing I'm kind of getting towards. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. That's kind of the direction we're heading. A little bit more about the search engine optimization. This is something that might interest Council. We're the top-ranked site in Google and Yahoo for the search term Surprise AZ. In fact, we're the top-ranked term for the general word surprise. Even before the dictionary definition comes up, SurpriseAZ.com comes up. And Surprise Baseball prompts an autocomplete to our spring training site. And I can show you what I mean by that. Here we are on Google. If you type in surprise, Surprise AZ, then the first thing you see under Surprise AZ is our website. Other things come up. These are paid spots over here. Other things that come up, Wikipedia, et cetera, citydata.com, which does this for every city. But our website is the first thing that comes up. Just the general word surprise, well, the first thing that Google produces for you is our official website. If we go to Surprise Baseball, it auto-completes to the Surprise Baseball. We can pick few. Let's pick Baseball Stadium. The #1 site is surprisespringtraining.com. And Yahoo does the same thing. So what this tells us is that our site is optimized quite well on search engines. This is all a logarithm based on other links, the way other sites linked our site. So this shows that our site is clearly optimized well on search engines. It's easy to find from anywhere in the world, no matter how it is you search for the site. What can we do with this asset to make the brand more apparent on it? Well, one thing we can do is look at our site architecture and look at our skin and incorporate the strategic marketing message a little more completely. So that, again, Councilman, we look at our architecture, we look at the way we graphically design the site so that we present those strategic platforms a little more clearly than they are now. Now, a caveat, or something I'd like to at least get in front of the Council and see what you think of that, is the website is not solely a marketing site. It's a site for community information, for community engagement, where people can find out how to contact a council person, how to get their trash picked up, how to request a service. That's a really significant component of that site. We can brand it with our look feel, and that's one of our next steps. But we've got to remember that it clearly is a site that also is for community engagement. Now, you see Scottsdale on there. The reason that's there is because everybody talks about Scottsdale, and I bring it up tonight only because it's one of the most self-conscious cities in the country in terms of its image. But when you go to the ScottsdaleAZ.gov site, this is the City of Scottsdale site, what you see is it's very definitely functional. It's all about contacting the mayor, the council, and the government, getting on being a diversity champion, doing your spending in Scottsdale during the holiday season. It's functional. It's all about city government. It's all about city services. It's all about residents contacting government. You get down here, though, and they do link to their Visitors and Convention Bureau site, which is gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's incredible. Better. Isn't that beautiful? This, in fact, was the result of a contest. This was the actual result of a contest. Very sophisticated image, well done, clearly, like I say, it's just a very sophisticated look. and it does match exactly what Scottsdale is trying to present. I mean, even on this site, you've got, easy, gentlemen, easy, easy.
Is there a lake in
That's more
Scottsdale?
voice speaking.
Sure there is.
Okay.
The Lake of the Mind in Scottsdale. You can even, as you can see, book a flight to Scottsdale from the home page of the Visitors Convention Bureau, and I better get off this site before it draws any further comment. But as you can see,
That is scant.
I mean, it's a beautiful site. They really did a nice job on it. Now, that site is supported by the City of Scottsdale, the City of Paradise Valley, and there's one other municipality whose name escapes me right now. They contract with those three entities, and they all, beg your pardon? Fountain Hills. Yes, indeed, it's Fountain Hills. They all contract with the CVB, or the CVB contracts with them to promote that image and promote that.
That
So,
didn't convey a lot of family life, though, did it?
no, it did not, did it?
That's not what they want their image to be, Skip.
Yeah, they've got a little different image.
If you're visiting, not in the image necessarily you want.
How do we place the brand before our audience is continued? Well, we don't have much advertising money, but what money we do have might be best utilized in online advertising. That puts Surprise in front of other audiences that are already online, which means that Surprise AZ is just a click away for them. The Be Surprised by Surprise logo is up there because last winter we did advertise online with that logo. Fairly successful. At least that's what AZ Central told us. They thought we did fine and wish we'd come back and buy it again. Our print advertising also includes a push towards the web. Everything we do with print does include a push towards the web.
That's got a nice feel. I like that.
Yeah, I really do. I think it was great to have the research to base that on, and it comes across looking really good. Progress Magazine, again, we always drive folks to the web. Some things for the council's consideration that you might have seen in the report. The consultant does say that it would be interesting to consider doing multi-publication ad buys in local and regional publications for around $250,000. A few other things that are in the report, again, just for your consideration, is a Surprise Days Festival, a signature celebration event. We do already have some really, I think, well-defined signature events. Tomorrow night is a great example, the Surprise Party. An icon of surprise, something that's a visual device that identifies the city and its values. They mentioned a bench. That's actually an idea Phoenix developed 4, 5, 6 years ago. Marginally successful, the front porch type concept. And they encourage the chamber to do direct mail with businesses and build more opt-in email uses there. A customized approach can still be relevant for, of course, the Economic Development Department, incorporating that brand into their selected advertising. CRS, the same thing. We can continue to incorporate a brand into all the looks citywide. So what's next? And again, this gets back to your original question, Councilman Hall, is what's next is we flesh this out. We flesh out the look and the feel. We commit, and this is important too, to the emphasis of the brand in every touch point that we have in our collateral and our advertising. We leverage the existing marketing media that we have and the existing resources that we have to promote the brand, mostly by unification, by getting everybody to work together. We take that layered messaging approach that we talked about. Over time, those multiple messages do begin to work with one another, and that image kind of presents itself to people's minds as they think about Surprise. It also gives us that consistency in tone, style, look, and feel that we think is desirable. We continue to strategically drive all of our audiences to the web while maintaining that key web function of being the place people go for information and access to their city government. But we can brand it with a look feel. It can be our primary vehicle for getting that image and that message out there, things that immediately tout Surprise, that have that consistent message, that really drive the brand. And we'd strategically target what money we have for key regional and national vehicles for that out-of-market messaging. We might consider spring training markets, for example, high-visit states such as California and some of our Midwestern states where a lot of our winter visitors come from. Regional and state media that appeal to different segments, and of course that's all as budget allows. Finally, in summary, here's what I think we can present to Council tonight, is the fact that we can move forward with the Surprise message. We can develop that look feel that for the brand that really captures the message. We can institute it across the platform. We can engage our partners in a commitment to the brand, and our ads and other collateral can be layered, proportional, and customized to reflect that. We can institute measurement, how our audience is reacting to the way we're presenting the city with the NCS, online progress surveys. The NCS is that National Citizen Survey. We can assess the site architecture in our skin in adapting the web to the brand while keeping that customer service focus. Strategically target online and publication ads as our budget permits. And there should be another slide. There it is. And with that, that concludes our presentation.
Ken, this is a workshop, and so there's going to be some discussions that will take place that don't probably make any sense, and I'm going to bring one of these up. Off the top of my head, there on our website there is viewers of either in-state or in the city viewers, and then out-of-state viewers.
We can measure viewers from around the country. Yeah,
Right.
from in-state, out-of-state.
Right. Is there a different message for somebody that is out of state inquiring regarding Surprise versus a feel and a look for somebody living in Surprise that wants more information capability driven to them regarding their local community versus a marketing approach of selling Surprise to those people out of state?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and
That's a good point.
yeah, it is. And I want
And it
to.
goes back to the mayor's point about the regionalism of the entertainment. In other words, there could be a map that would point out the proximity of all these different things around Surprise. If you stay in Surprise, you know, we're 9 miles from the football stadium. We're 8 miles from the zoo. We're, you know, I mean, where you see this map and you go, wow, Surprise is right. There's a lot of things to do right there.
There's a little bit of a slippery slope there. As long as it's a governmental, okay, you can probably get by that. But when you start, and that's where I think, and Councilmember Alton and I talked about this before the meeting, this is where we're going to need some reliance on the chamber.
Yes.
And the reason is
Right.
because the chamber should be driving some of these things that we can't do, because we can't promote a private entity, be they nonprofit or for-profit, and they need to, in my opinion, if their website, and I've looked at it a little bit, but don't have in-depth knowledge, but we can bounce out to their website, and then on their website, for example, one of the questions we get is a list of churches in the city, which is a good question, but it should be driven out of the chamber website. If you want to know where to go to eat in Surprise, you've got that. Now, what happens is if a governmental entity does this, there's a cost, obviously, to maintaining it, but you have to give everybody the same level of recognition. Right. And one of the issues sometimes, personal experience, went through, did a website, and we put everybody that had a business license, and we had a couple of adult entertainment establishments, and the question was, well, why are they there? Well, the reason that they were there is because they had a valid business license. Right. But the chamber does not have those restrictions.
And my point is that as a citizen of Surprise and the capability of internet that we now have, wouldn't it be great to have the homepage on everybody's computer, the city of Surprise, and from there we go out. We have access to Google, or we have access to this, or whatever. But they can also find out the weather in Surprise for that day and for the next 7 days, and they can, you know, the traffic conditions on Bell, you know, what's happening in our region around us. I have to think that there is a different feel for an out-of-state versus.
I hear you exactly. I know exactly what you're saying, and the power of the web is so immense, and the possibilities are so vast that the more you think about that, the more you realize, you know, we could have an entire site that's just Surprise centric in that regard. One of the things we've talked about, we're just spitballing here, is we've got the Traffic Management Center.
Right.
Well, put that online.
Yeah.
Right.
There's lots of things that would be very Surprise centric. The reason I put the homepage up here is to get back to your original question, and this is a very, like I say, prototypical, almost, it's not even in beta, but as we saw that we were moving in generally the right direction, we thought, well, at least something we can do quickly is get these images there. So no matter where you're looking at the site from, whether you're a resident or you're in Iowa wondering whether to come out to Surprise for a baseball game, within 30 seconds you get a lot of different images of what the city looks like. And that does start to create a look feel already in your mind. Wow, this is a place with lots of sunshine. I can go hiking, etc. Wow, that looks like a sophisticated, cool little shot there. And you start to build that image already.
Do we link the community? Do we do that, John?
It's on. I think you put it on my.
It's
area,
on
but
Councilman
maybe it
Williams'
should
site.
be on
Yeah.
on a large area. One comment I had, Ken, and listening to everybody, and I thank you for this, because as I read through this, I think I had some of the same feelings as Councilman Hall as I went through this, and I'm looking, for me, in the back of my mind, it's all about economic development, and I know that's what we're all thinking here. How do we fill the inventory? How do we bring in employment? So as I'm reading through this, this is nice. This is a nice report, but it didn't give any kind of direction. So I thank you for that presentation, because I think it gave me a sense of, this makes a little more sense. I know where we're going with this. One other thing I looked at today, and I looked at other city websites, is our Living in Surprise. When you click on that, I love the website, by the way. It's easy, it's user friendly. I liked when you guys changed that. So when you click on that and you go to that main page, some cities have like a visit this city section, and when you click on that, the first question is, well, when's my trash pickup? Maybe as we look at Living in Surprise, we start bringing in the links to the chamber and something else that will market the city, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, that's all. I think that goes directly to what you said about, or what we said about looking at the skin, looking at the architecture.
Right. Yeah,
with this marketing in mind.
We have an icon on there. It's called, was it My Locate Surprise or something, that if you go in and key that, it'll tell you who your council rep is, when your garbage pickup is. It'll tell you everything you need to know.
Right, My Surprise Address, it's called.
Yeah. If you pull that down and you type in what your address is there, it'll tell you everything you need to know, who your water service provider is.
Anybody want to offer an address?
Oh, no, thanks. Go ahead, Ken.
No? Okay.
That's nice. That's a nice function.
But I hear exactly what you're saying, Councilman, and that's, I think that's what we mean when we say, well, let's look at the architecture, let's look at what we can do to get these marketing pillars a little more engaged in the architecture of the site.
Ken, I'd like to see us schedule another workshop. I think you've heard some direction here from council, but I'd like us to drill a little deeper and have us help you understand what it is that we're seeing when we talk about a speed world or about the white tanks or about whatever, and then perhaps through some intentional questions from you, we can be responsive. And I think generally it looks like we're going in the right direction, but I'd like to see us develop a little bit more complete strategy that we all understand, and a message that we can take regardless of where we go. It's the same message, just in our words, telling the story of Surprise.
Beautiful. Absolutely. That would be very helpful to our department to have that kind of guidance, Mayor.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you very much for that presentation. Tonight's work session requires executive session for a briefing from our city attorney. We will not be taking any action when we come out of executive session other than to adjourn the meeting, but I would like a motion to convene to executive session.
So moved.
All in favor, say yes.
Aye.
Yo.